Hi, Shauna.
Hi, Kristen. How are you?
So good. So good to see you, as always.
Me too.
Thank you so much for agreeing to do this with me. I just have been so excited about this conversation because so many of the chats I've had so far are with women I've either known for quite a long time. It's really only a handful of women I've had the opportunity to chat with who I'm either just getting to know or have recently gotten to know. And to chat with you and hear more about your journey, I've been really looking forward to. So thank you for agreeing to come chat with me.
My pleasure. Talking about myself, and that's my favorite topic.
Yeah. I think that's true for most people. I think I tell my kids, like, the only thing you really need to do in life is ask a bunch of questions and you'll be totally fine.
Absolutely. I'm really honored to be able to sit here and talk with you.
So, Shauna and I have been getting to know each other through a local leadership program called Leadership Sacramento, which is run through the chamber. Highly recommend, by the way, for anybody either that's local or I know that they run these through many kind of urban areas, chambers, some version of a local leadership program. It's incredible to get to know your community, but even more incredible, the people that you get to be in community with. And it has been really eye opening for me. So, highly, just a plug for some leadership.
So I concur. Everyone should go apply.
Yes. In fact, I think applications are coming out. So,
Yeah,
we're really doing a local plug.
real time.
So, Shauna currently holds the role as president and CEO of First U.S. Community Credit Union, which, let's be honest, is just super badass. And she does carry herself. She has such a poise to her, but she has also just this way of showing up with an openness and a friendliness and just excited to connect. And I think that that is not always what we get to see in leadership, and that's male or female, right? And also knowing that you hold a huge amount of kind of what's the word I'm looking for? You don't hold the impact, but you in your position have a very direct impact in our community. And I truly did not understand the mechanics and the importance of the role of credit unions and how they serve our communities. So it's been super cool getting to know Shauna and getting to hear more through her lens and her passion for the industry. So I'm excited for her to share more about that and kind of what got her interested in this space. But let's rewind a little bit and get maybe a little bit more of a sense of your journey and what led you here. Lately, I've been chatting with a lot of women about the early years, post college, if you went the higher ed route, pre full on career, whatever route you chose, where everything is new. You might not know exactly where you're headed. Chatted very recently with Gen Zer on the series, and she was kind of holding this tension of what she called the duality of both impossibility and possibility because everything feels open and new and fresh and yet she feels like there's so many steps to take to go in any direction. So just curious what those early days felt like for you.
Goodness. That really takes me back. Relate to what you were talking about with the Gen Zer. Because when you have all blue sky, how do you know where to start? How do you know which direction to take that first step? My mom was a teacher, my dad was a pastor. I think teaching is in my bones. So when I graduated from college, I was like, I have no idea what I'm going to do with this degree, so I guess I'll teach. And I actually started to work on my teaching credential. And I was doing substitute teaching while I was back in school. And I realized that I was not enjoying myself. The students were pushing back on me. The administration was putting pressure on all of the educators. And then the teachers themselves, I would watch them in the lunchroom go at each other. And I thought, I have too much of a need to be liked to be
Yeah.
in public education.
To have all of these people coming at me from all these different angles.
At me from every direction. No one was being nice. No one's your friend. And I really do hate discipline. So I decided to,
Discipline for yourself or discipline for others or both?
it's kids and other people's kids. I kind of had no problem disciplining my own, honestly, but
Yeah.
people's kids or other people as adults, I don't love the discipline, but I like setting guardrails and then trusting everyone to operate within them.
I love that.
Do the work up front and not on the back end. But with kids in classrooms, good luck. So I took my career and I'll just kind of launch into a little bit of the journey, if that's okay. And
Please.
I decided to take the skills that I learned through my education classes and apply them in workplaces. So my early career was in training and development. And another thing I would say for people just starting out is that it's a meandering path. It's
Yes.
not a straight line. Like you don't go, okay, so it's a blue sky and I don't know where to take the next step, but I'm going to wind up here. So now it has to be a straight line journey to that place. Like if you said, yeah, you're going to be a credit union CEO, I would be like, why credit unions for one? And cool, I'm going to be a CEO. So it was just, I don't think I could have fathomed it. It unfolds. So
Yes.
I went into training and development and I worked for a few different organizations. Ended up being the training manager at First Credit Union and absolutely fell in love with credit union.
That's incredible. I totally agree and wish that this was more a part, frankly, of our education system, of this recognition that, you're asked, we're all guilty of it, myself as a parent too, of asking the young ones, like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And it feels like that sets this tone for the entire path that unfolds, which is, well, you have to pick something. And I went to Cal Poly, which is you have to declare your major before you even enter into a four-year program, which is insane. I went to school at 17. Like the fact that I was at 17 supposed to choose my life path is
Big a ridiculous app.
it's a lot of responsibility for somebody that was very irresponsible. So I feel like, there's this, yeah, there's a misconception. I think unless it's very, very, very clear to you that you're going to be, a doctor or a lawyer, or there are obvious paths for certain vocations. But I think for the majority of us, it is kind of this squiggly path, and staying curious and staying open and taking on new opportunities as they come. So it's funny because one of the questions I wrote down for you was, as you started on your path, had you always envisioned yourself in a financial institution and or, leading a company of the size that you're leading? So, yeah, do you, now that you're here, what is it about this industry that got you hooked and has allowed you to stay in this space for as long as you have?
Yeah, I think the the root of it and why I fell in love with credit unions because I did not care that much about finance. Really, I was fairly financially responsible, but not highly responsible. I was still, as a young adult, really following my whims with my money. I can't say that there was any draw there, but what I found is that the more information people have about how finance in America works, and it's a constantly evolving landscape, but knowledge is power. And that I've always believed in. That goes back to those teacher fundamentals that I was raised with. So the more we can share information, the better. And that's what credit unions are trying to do is to give communities the tools that they need in order to better their lives through their finances. Because finances can destroy lives. And then fundamentally, credit unions are not for profit financial cooperatives. And being a financial cooperative, the cooperative nature of not only a credit union, so they were started because people couldn't get loans except for from loan sharks unless they already had money. It was mostly loans went to businesses or very rich and wealthy people who didn't really need the loans. So what was the poor sharecroppers supposed to do? So they started pooling their money, and it really comes out of the agricultural movement in the 1800s in Germany, where they were pooling their money. And then if you had a feast year and I had a famine year, then I could borrow from the groups. And then next year, maybe I was doing great, but your crop was lousy. And then you could borrow with very, very small interest, not the exorbitant interest rate. So that's the roots of it. And in the US, particularly, we've taken that movement not just for our credit unions to pool the money and lend it back out, but among the movement itself, how can we all work together and join forces to help the financial futures of all of our members collectively, not just my members at First U.S. Community Credit Union. And that's the part I fell in love with. That as a training manager early on, I was connected to training managers and training professionals at other credit unions. And I would say, hey, what are you doing for your orientation? And they'd say, oh, I'll send you my orientation binder. This is back in the early
Was
2000s.
there
So
were binders?
just we're using email at that time. Email was a new tool. And so we would just send everything that we had. And oh, do you have a policy on this? Oh, yeah, here's our policy. And I'd never seen that happen in any other industry, never heard of it in any other industry. And that was the part that I really fell in love with. And it's continued to be one of the best parts of my career, most enjoyable parts of my career. And I'm proud to say that, I moved to Sacramento for this opportunity. I've only been here for 2 years, but when I got here, I was welcomed with open arms by the CEOs of Sacramento, who meet regularly to talk about the issues that our institutions are facing together.
That's incredible. I think to recognize that kind of shared spirit of collective impact, and everybody has their eye on what it means to lift up the communities that they serve, because that's not every industry behaves in that way, even if they are impact minded, right? It can be a little bit of elbows out, and this is my space, or I'm going after this funding, so you better not go after this funding, right? There's so much of that. So to hear that this is still the spirit in which you all operate is really incredible. And you had shared before, this is really has been an education for me, and I think some folks will be interested. I believe you had shared that many of these started as a kind of almost like industry focused. Like, you are schools credit union, that means you're serving, teachers, education systems, right? There are others that are serving other industry specific spaces. Is it true, though, that now there are institutions like yours where there are industry agnostic and anyone can become a member?
Yes. And I shouldn't say anyone within certain guidelines, which generally now is more geographically bound than industry or employer bound.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
You might have, like, my credit union began by serving federal civilian employees. Golden One started by serving state employees, and the Air Force employees, or so all kinds of different industries or employers. And so then we're just really small. And then over the years, the laws have changed. The first credit unions were in the late 1930s. And there were a lot of credit unions that started right around that time, but the evolution has allowed them to open up their.
Do you think that there's still a little bit of like a marketing issue for credit union? Like, do you, what is it? Why do not more people understand or utilize or?
By this question. Uh, this is something we do talk about, and it feels very defeating because even though even though many credit unions, the membership has grown, we still only occupy about 3 to 4% of the entire financial services market
Wow.
in the U.S., and that has been the case since the 1980s, and maybe before. I'll have to fact check myself later. So we have not really expanded, even if we've expanded in certain communities, we haven't expanded the basic asset base. Just
Mm,
then, all the credit unions together make up fewer national assets than the biggest banks.
mm. That's so interesting, right? Because when you think about, yeah, the benefit, and this is so not the same, but it reminds me of when I started doing work in the public library system, that there's like this massive gap between how the public perceives what a library is and does in their community versus what it actually does on behalf of its community. I mean, it's wild, right? Sacramento, in particular, our downtown library, it is literally a service-based organization at this point, right? And there are so many things that they offer up, and they are a safe communal space that, when we think about a library, you think about you check out a book. That is so not what it is anymore, but they're really having a hard time, I
I'm
think.
guilty. I just found somebody spoke at my Rotary Club about the library, and I was like, I can get a free subscription to the things that I pay for right now, or I don't pay for New York Times, and now I'm not going to because I have
Yes.
free already.
That's right. Yes. Or Libby, or, there's
Oh, yeah, it just goes on and on and on. Why would I pay Audible when I
That's right. Yes, yes. But there's a perception issue, I think, after all these years of, what they actually provide. So I'm curious, kind of as you all continue to evolve, for folks to see and understand the benefit and how much of an impact you all have. So yeah, I thought that was so interesting because even just in getting to know you, I've learned so much in just such a short amount of time. So we need a great, cool marketing campaign for the Gen Zers.
I hope, now with the laws going into effect regarding financial literacy in
Mm,
education,
mm-hmm.
I'm hopeful a little bit that we'll have the opportunity, one, that credit union will step up and help partner with the people who are developing curriculum, or if they need guest speakers that will be called upon, because we certainly show up and talk to people about how to understand finances in today's world.
Absolutely. No, I agree. I think so much of the work I've done has been in the either social impact space or working within communities that um, really, when you think about what it means to try and create opportunity, if financial literacy is not part of that conversation, then it's not sustainable because you can create opportunity, you can create additional ways for folks to enter into the workforce. But if there's not a way to then understand what it means to hold that new responsibility of, additional salary or whatever it is, if something comes along or if there's a tragedy, and we're not doing our job of integrating those tools and that training as part of the service providing, I think it's a real disservice. So I love this just being embedded in our education system because that's
Overdue, right?
much needed. I literally, that meme of like, I didn't learn how to do my taxes, but I'm so glad I learned how to like do the do-si do in high school. Like what the hell? Back to you. So you've built this decades long career, specifically at one organization before stepping into your current CEO role. And I'm just curious, like, what does it take not to just stay, but to continue evolving and growing, especially, if someone loves where they're at and they see themselves there for a long time, but are interested in developing themselves or still evolving or taking on additional roles. Is there anything that you could point back to for your journey and being intentional as you found yourself in this organization for the time period that you did?
Yeah. Well, that's a little bit tough. I have 15 different answers to that question. Well,
You can.
out in my stream of consciousness thoughts here. So something you said earlier, it's been a word I've been gravitating to for some time now. But earlier in our conversation, you said something about staying curious. And so I think that's a big part of it, is staying curious and looking at kind of pulling on those little threads every now and then, like, I wonder why we do it like this, even though maybe you've been doing it that way for the entire time you've been at that organization or in your career. What's really the fundamental why behind it? And sometimes it's just for curiosity's sake and you move on, and sometimes you find stuff that doesn't make any sense.
Mm,
And so then having conversations with if you're not the decision maker or the change maker in the organization, with the people who are, like, hey, I noticed this, and even just sharing the insights of, hey, or asking other people, hey, I wonder why we do this, then it can start a conversation. People start to see you as a thinker, as
mm.
someone who's invested in the organization. You're not a paper pusher. Do we have those anymore? I don't know. That's antiquated terminology. But, as somebody who just checks off your list and goes on about the next task, you're somebody who's thinking about the whys behind things. Now, you can't let that get in the way of actually doing your job and, making progress and performing in a way that your supervisor is expecting. But if you look for opportunities to be of service, find that need and then fill it, you start to make a reputation for yourself within the organization as someone who can be counted upon. And
Yeah.
I feel like that kind of just that being of service is probably fundamentally the most impactful thing for creating a growing growth centered career.
I love that you say that. I feel like it's so interesting in all of these conversations. across the board, I would tell you that that has been a very loud pattern that has risen is in speaking with women, specifically women who have kind of crafted a career where they have taken on more and more responsibility or have a position of authority or ownership, is the ones that have landed in spaces where not only do they have that position, but they love what they're doing. Or not every day, not everybody. No, there's no chance of that. Sorry, but if for the most part you are fulfilled and you find excitement in your work and you know you're having an impact, I think many times it is because you started with that lens of service. It's not that it wound up like that. It is, okay, I'm interested in helping, growing, learning. Yes, in that I get to now have these different opportunities. But I think by carving it out intentionally in that way, then you are likely going to be given opportunities that you may not have expected along the way. And then you get to hone and shape, oh, this is what feels right or feels good or where I think I'm really shining, versus just trying to, like, quote unquote, climb the corporate ladder or whatever, right? I think that's how we can sometimes get in trouble, is when we have like this blind kind of desire to land into a specific position. There's nothing wrong with ambition, but I think the difference I'm starting to hear with the women in these spaces is so many started with that lens of curiosity, but also with the angle of being in service. And it's not surprising to me, but I have found it really, really interesting that that continues to come up in these conversations. So I love that you just reiterated that.
Too, and I'm gratified to hear that that's a theme that you're starting to hear, because there's success and it depends on how it's measured, right? There are prices to be paid for pure ambition, and for me, some of those prices weren't worth it, and sometimes they're just not worth it in a season.
Mm,
When I had younger kids, I was still doing a lot of work, but I couldn't say yes to as many opportunities when they were little. Or, so family situations dictate what you can and can't do.
mhm.
But certainly figuring out a way to say yes to as many opportunities as you can is great. But then I also saw people that were ambitious at the expense of other people. And one, I didn't like how it looked or felt on the receiving side.
Totally.
But by the same token, I didn't really see those people having any happiness or satisfaction other than the triumph of, every new rung of the ladder that they would
Yeah.
climb.
Yeah.
I think the kind of success, or how at least I wanted to experience it. And so I think there's more and more people are hopefully waking up to that, like, okay, what is success? How do you define it? And part of that piece that you identified is that I want to love what I do.
Yes, I agree. I feel like the climbing of the going up the rungs or whatever, it's almost akin to like buying the new dress. Like it feels good for a hot minute.
Yeah, I get the new dress, and then 6 months later, I'm like, this whole thing,
Like, this
right?
thing sucks. Why did I ever buy this? Or I like wore it once, or like whatever. So yeah, I think there's something to that analogy.
Words on that.
Yes, yes. You mentioned earlier on, when your kids were younger, and I really, really, really try to be careful here with the asking of women, like the quote unquote balancing of children and career, because I think there's such nuance here, and we typically don't ask men this question, right? It's like, well, you had kids and that's not even part of the conversation. But you brought it up in a way that I think leads to a question that arises for me, which is, so you knew in this moment, like, I cannot necessarily say yes to all of the things that I might want to say yes to. Do you remember feeling that was an intentional choice, that you knew that, or is it that you're looking back on it and can recognize that? Or if you were in that moment and it was intentional, did that ever feel challenging to recognize that you were maybe having to kind of put pieces down or maybe on pause until you felt like it was more of the right time?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And there is a moment in time, and I'll share it with you, that I haven't thought about in a long time. But during the Great Recession, so 2008, 9, even into 10, credit unions and financial institutions in general were having a really hard time.
Mm.
And the credit union that I was working for, we went through the pain of closing a few branches and laying off some team members in order to get our finances online. Because in that moment, we had more than an average of one member per day walking in and turning over the car keys to their car and just
Wow.
voluntarily surrendering their vehicle that they had a loan on because of unemployment or they just couldn't afford it or whatever. So this is a really rough time for everyone. I did retain my job there, but it was a really hard time. And so I started thinking, okay, like my career, it was more like keep your head down and hope they
Mm.
don't notice you, so you're a survivor kind of.
Like skate under the radar of it.
I was not, my career was not growing there. Many of our careers weren't growing there during that time. And so I remember having a conversation with my husband. So my kids would have been early elementary at that time. And there was some opportunities that were out of the city that we were living in. And I was like, I kind of maybe wanting to see if maybe we move. And so we just sat down and said, no, we're not going to move. I didn't want to change industries at that point. And so I just thought, well, then I'm going to do the best that I can to impact my organization, realizing that I'm not going to have tremendous growth here. But I have this desire to be constantly working on something. So I started pursuing another avenue of a hobby that I became a little bit obsessive about. So I ended up going to school to become a registered yoga teacher. And
What?
so, yeah,
Wait, I didn't know this. Okay, no wonder I love you. I knew I did. But like, okay, well, stop. This is really cool.
that was the way I fueled my desire to grow during that
Yes.
time because it wasn't going to happen in my actual career at the time. And
Oh my gosh.
hindsight, I'm like really glad that happened because it gave me a little pause, little reset. It gave me this other thing that I love to do. I mean, I already was passionate about yoga, but then I combined it with my passion for teaching. And,
Mm.
then I was still there in my organization. And when it was time to pick up the pieces from the Great Recession and really start growing and moving forward, I was there, I was refreshed, I was ready to take on.
I love that for so many reasons. So much of my evolution over the last 2 years has been as it relates to this recognition that your job or your vocation or your title does not have to, that's not where your identity ends. And I don't know that I ever allowed myself this kind of opportunity to think about how other things feed you and feed your soul, right? Like, I was an art major in college. I have all these interests outside of just building a business or building in service of someone else's business. But because I was so hell bent on like just being in my job and doing the best job I could. And I think I really kind of cut off some of those pieces. And some part of it is hard, right? As young kids, the whole thing, right? So there are elements that you do have to kind of like set down for a little while, regardless at times. But I think in this new season of my life, I'm recognizing, wait a second, there are still ways to infuse these things that we care about. It does not have to just be in service of the business that we work inside of, or even the business that we're working on. And I think it can be tricky to figure out that, wait, just because you're not spending all of your waking hours pushing and hustling and, moving into the next role or whatever, there's still ways to develop or evolve outside of that are ultimately in service of who you are holistically as a human. But I think that unfortunately is a lesson I learned a little bit later that I maybe wish I would have learned a little bit earlier on. And sometimes I do think it takes almost like a forcing mechanism to have that happen. But I think how cool that you now have this lasting piece of your legacy, which is continuing to pour into another passion that you care about that will last you forever, right? Just to stay on the personal track here a little bit, I recently was in a conversation where I was asked something that has shaped me as a leader that doesn't always make it or wouldn't typically wind up in my bio or my resume. And I thought that was such a fantastic question because it gets you thinking about what are the elements of your life that have shaped how you show up today. So curious what your answer to that might be.
Wow, that's big. What's interesting to me is like there's so much more of what shaped me as a leader that doesn't show up in my bio that I
Yes, that's so real.
mean, that's like, okay, everything that's not in my bio, those are all things that shape me as a,
That's so true.
but I think I would have to talk about my mentors.
Mm,
It's too bad that I can't, Shauna has this achievement, and here's all the people that contributed to it
mm, mm.
significantly. Kind of like the
Like acknowledgments in a book.
yeah, I've had some really fantastic mentors that, I mentioned that I'm in a cooperative movement. So if there are networks that some of them are formal networks that are created that you can join, and others are you meet somebody at a conference or at a credit union school, and then they become lifelong friends and confidants. And so I have a few people that I meet with regularly that some of them are now CEOs like me that we've kind of bounced ideas off of each other for the last 25 years. I had a really significant mentor, my boss, for about almost probably a decade before I left my former credit union, who was phenomenal at pushing me to grow and giving me opportunities and giving me the space to fail and learn. And quite frankly, I don't think I become a CEO in the alternate reality where I don't have that mentorship from him. So shout out to my friend Steve Matuka. And then the, you know, we talk about supporting women. I met a group of women almost 5 years ago at a credit union school, and it's a 3-year program, and we got to know each other, and we started traveling personally, this group of 5 of us, and continued even when the school was over. Now we still meet once a year and pick each other's brains and have spa day, and it's a perfect mix of personal and professional support. And then just, it's that group that you can just reach out to, whether you're having, if you want to celebrate, we're there to celebrate each other, and if you need to fall apart, we're there too. So I think there's just unnamed, many uncounted groups of people or individuals that have really shaped my leadership.
I feel like that is like one of the biggest hacks, I think, in career development is finding your people, whether that's through mentorship. I know it can be tricky sometimes because it's hard to know who is looking out for you in those ways. I think sometimes it evolves over time. You recognize, oh, this person really does have my best interest and they see something in me and I can, evolve into that, right, which is beautiful. But just as important is the groups of people that are your peers that are surrounding you that you find can pour into you, that you pour back into. And I think I had no idea how important that was to me until I no longer had the job that I held up until 2 years ago, because that was my community. I had found just this, it felt like family, which I know you're not supposed to say about your job, but truly it was everything. And when that went away, I couldn't have said it at the time, but I look back on that time now and go, oh my gosh, I know what I was so desperately seeking was that level of community again, as it relates to your profession or your peer network. And I went through an executive coaching program over the last year, and outside of the learnings and the education you get, it was truly the community of people that come around that are still now, we kind of call it like our green room, so to speak, the people that you find that you allow to speak into, or that are going to be in support of, or tell you the honest truth. Sometimes it can feel difficult, but you trust them to speak into that because you know that they see you and they can speak some truth for you in a way that feels like it's going to take you somewhere. Those things are hard, I think, they're not hard to find necessarily, but it does take time to find the right groups of people sometimes. And then other times you're just super lucky, right? And you end up in these spaces and you're like, what the heck? The one question that I do have to ask every woman that I chat with, just as I think about the work that I'm involved in now around evolution and this bridging of business strategy and leadership development and what it means to be looking at our lives in these holistic ways and thinking about how all of this in some ways in service of the impact that we want to have or the legacy that we want to leave. So, my question for you, Shonna, is what does building a legacy mean for you?
Such a great question. I think it goes back to my experience in the mentorship I was just talking about and my personal purpose. As I stepped in to become CEO, my purpose is to grow the leaders who will grow my organization.
Mm,
And when I look back at my whole career, really, that's been a focal point, whether I had words for it or not, the entire time, or even in my personal life. Want to grow these leaders that will grow the world or grow whatever it is that they're working on. So I definitely take mentorship very seriously. And the people that I have had as direct reports, that I do have as direct reports, I'm trying to focus on what their goals are and how can I help them achieve those? How can I provide opportunities for growth and for failure and for learning and for community? And so hopefully that's building these wonderful leaders and then that they were providing through our credit union an opportunity for our community to grow more richly and for people to have the space that they need and within their financial lives to live a great and fulfilled and satisfied life. And that just perpetuates for all of us.
so cool. Yes, I think that is such a beautiful way of thinking about how our work is so much more than just our work. It is about humanity and to know that you are intentionally pouring into the next generation of leadership, right? Who knows then what opportunities they'll take on because of that mentorship. So, incredible. And I think you're so wonderful. I think you're so awesome. And I'm so thrilled that this leadership program that we found ourselves in this year has brought us together and that you are someone that I am excited to continue to grow as part of my own community of people that I adore and love. So just thank you so much for sharing some time.
Thank you so much for the invitation, for the incredibly kind words. All the compliments were for sure putting us for. It's been absolutely my ego's really fun. But seriously, I appreciate the opportunity to be provoked with some very good questions that made me really think. So take to share some of my stories.
Of course. Yes. Thank you again. I'll see you soon.
All right.
Bye.